Great, thank you very much, Marcelo. And I'll ask you about 10 minutes after my introduction to the book and summary of the book to perhaps ask me questions, because I didn't realize that you had read Principles by Ray Dalio. So Ray Dalio is one of the largest money managers on the planet. He's managing over $160 billion. He has over 1,500 employees, and all were required to read his book called Principles. And of course, it's very clear what that means. It means that he developed some principles that define his path to wisdom, and some of the lessons learned are embedded in each of the principles that he learned over the course of his career and his life. So you can read the book. It's actually comprised of two separate volumes. One is work and one is life, and it contains hundreds of algorithm-style rules that you can use to navigate the world. So all of us have principles. Probably one principle we all share in common is to tell the truth. Another principle may be to the golden rule, treat others with the same respect that you would like to be treated with. And others may include helping other people in your family, in your workplace, or your school. So three of the lessons from this masterpiece that he wrote include: one, principles are a powerful weapon in the fight against flawed thinking. So what is flawed thinking? Let's say you draw a conclusion that it's based on a false premise. So if any part of the premise is false, even if you apply perfect logic, the conclusion will be partially or totally false, just because your assumption is false. So let's say you assume that snow, when it lands on the ground, is cold, and it's, as long as it's cold outside, it will never melt. But of course, we all know that the freezing point is about 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it goes to, say, 40, 50 degrees, the snow will melt. But if you assume that if it's cold outside, it won't melt, your conclusion that snow never melts would be false. So that's an example of a syllogism, which is applying logic to a premise to achieve a conclusion. So if anything in the premise is false, you'll achieve a false conclusion. So the key to that principle is verification of assumptions. If you can do research or homework or ask questions, the right questions, and verify the assumptions, it'll enhance the probability that yes, it'll enhance the probability that the conclusion will be correct. You have any remarks, Marcelo, on that one? Okay. So the other principle, one of the other key lessons in the book Principles is that radical truth and transparency are two of Ray Dalio's most important ideas. So what does he mean by radical truth and transparency? So transparency is when nothing is hidden regarding the truth. Some people use asymmetry of information to hide the truth and only show, let's say, the best possible point of view. Let's say it's a leading politician, the president of the United States, and something embarrassing happens. And he has a choice, or she has a choice, whether or not to publicly discuss it or ignore it. And if it's something to do with national security and it's embarrassing to the United States, some presidents will decide not to be transparent, not to be totally honest, and to either ignore it or deny it or lie and cover up the truth. But if the truth comes out and it's proven, it could be very embarrassing to the president of the United States. So Ray's one of his most important ideas is don't hide the truth. Be transparent, even if it's not the truth that you prefer. So that is a type of radical truth that takes a risk, a political risk in this case, to reveal the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And of course, it could have negative repercussions. It could cause a policy change. It could cause a member of the administration to be fired. It could cause someone to be scapegoated, meaning blamed for whatever the problem was. So that's a kind of radical truth that actually could violate the golden rule, which is to treat others with the same respect that you want to be treated. So he believes that radical truth and transparency are extremely important in managing other people's money, because the last thing you want to do is make a mistake and hide it. So the third principle is great businesses use principles to create environments where the best ideas win. So let's examine, what does that mean? First of all, what's a great business? Let's choose an example. Tesla. Tesla is an electric car company that's listed on NASDAQ, and the market capitalization is worth more than all of the other car companies in the United States combined. It has a lot less revenue than all of the other car companies combined. It only has 176 million last year in US dollars, but the value of the total company, the number of shares outstanding times the price of Tesla equals to total market capitalization. And that is so much bigger than all of the car companies that are also listed publicly, like Ford and General Motors, for example. So that's an example of a great business that actually has grown so much that it's worth more than the rest of the industry. Now, great businesses use principles, according to Ray Dalio, to create environments where the best ideas win. What does that mean? It means that a corporate environment, which is like a school, only perhaps bigger, and manages more money and more resources and comes up with more inventions than a school will come up with, even during a science fair. The best ideas in a science fair have to be, let's say, based on science, meaning based on truth and discovery. Science uses something called the scientific method for discovering what is true in the physical world. And it uses disciplines like physics, chemistry, biology, even subcategories of those sciences like nanobiology, microbiology, systems biology, for discovering what is true in a scientific environment. In a business environment, there are other tools for discovering the truth. For example, accounting. And there's other types of accounting, like forensic accounting. Or another one would be economic analysis, microeconomic analysis and macroeconomic analysis. And these are tools for discovering the best ideas about the environment, which in the case of some businesses are a financial environment, others are a technology environment like Tesla, where they're trying to come up with the most efficient electric batteries for holding energy. And that's one of the keys to the success of Tesla. So great businesses use principles like science or accounting or financial analysis or economic analysis. And they also have other principles like telling the truth to the public. So if there's an electric car planned for release next year and it doesn't pass the safety test, they can't lie to the public. They have to tell the truth and reveal that the safety test did not result in a safe automobile. So that's an example of a principle called telling the truth that is applied in the business environment to win and earn and maintain the trust of the customers of the great business. So those are examples of 3 lessons from this book. So let me now summarize a few other lessons in the book. If you ask Ray Dalio what he thinks about why he thinks having principles, meaning formulas for success or truisms, these are synonyms for principles. Why does he think having principles is important? And he may give you this answer. Principles are a way of successfully dealing with reality to get what you want out of life. Let me repeat that. Principles are a way of successfully dealing with reality to get what you want out of life. Well, Ray uses the example of Mexico defaulting on its debt, meaning it owed a lot of money. Hundreds of billions of dollars were owed to banks in the United States. And when he was younger, he predicted that Mexico would default on its debt and that this would cause a global economic crisis. In fact, he testified in front of Congress, the US Congress, and talked about it on television. While he was right, and Mexico did default, meaning they couldn't pay the interest and principal to the banks for their debt, the global economic crisis never happened. And business continued to do well across the world. Stocks continued to go up in general. So he lost all of his money on this financial bet, and he had to fire all of his employees. And that was the biggest failure he had had in his life. So the lesson that he learned was that always think rationally, particularly when you're managing big responsibility, like political responsibility or managing other people's money or building a product. Always think rationally, not emotionally. It's okay to have compassion. It's okay to care about your employees, but make decisions based on true assumptions, true premises, and think rationally what could go wrong in this scenario, what could happen. So a lot of people make mistakes because their assumptions are damaged or flawed because of emotional input. There's nothing wrong with emotions. Emotions like anger and fear can actually inform your judgment. But if you make decisions only based on emotions and not based on facts and not based on rational analysis, like verifying the assumptions, you may come up with the wrong conclusion if you're employing emotions instead of logic and fact checking in your view of reality. So that's another principle that he holds dear, is build your view of the world based on truth and rationality, not just emotions. Another lesson that he thought is very important, two of the most important principles that I discussed earlier are radical truthfulness and transparency. Imagine you go to school and your teacher is telling you about another country like Brazil. And that teacher doesn't like the president of Brazil. And that teacher tells you things about Brazil that are generally true, but exaggerates something that is true, takes it out of context, and doesn't tell you the facts about Brazil in context. For example, the rainforest. A few years ago, in fact, 2 years ago, the rainforest was burning, and there was a lot of rainforest that was burning up. And we know how important green trees and green plants are for converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. They call the rainforest in Brazil the lungs of the earth. So can you imagine if the leader of Brazil was against environmental protection and wanted to help defend the cattle owners and the industrialists to chop down the trees and burn them and make room for more agriculture, for more cattle? And that was their political bias. And they covered up the truth about the value of the rainforest to the global environment, not to the individual farmer or the industrialist who needs to clear the rainforest to make room for their crops or their cattle, but they covered up the truth that the environment of the planet Earth needs oxygen. It needs to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, and plants don't get paid, but they provide us with trillions of dollars worth of ecosystem services. And it's a known fact through photosynthesis that green chlorophyll inside the plant, there's this biochemical, a natural chemical called chlorophyll that is part of photosynthesis that converts using sunlight hitting the chlorophyll, creates a chemical reaction to breathe into the plant carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. And that's a scientific fact. It's a truth. But if the president of Brazil doesn't mention that truth, ignores that truth, and talks only about the need for economic development, therefore we don't have to stop the fires burning up the rainforest, that's not radical truthfulness. That's radical cover-up. So radical transparency is the opposite of covering up the truth. It's bringing in experts to testify and tell the public the scientific truth about photosynthesis and why the rainforest is so valuable in providing ecosystem services to the planet Earth. So we all know that these ideas would be very helpful in a business, but would they be useful in your personal life to tell all of your friends an embarrassing truth? No, it wouldn't be good for you to tell people an embarrassing truth. So it's okay not to tell people things that would embarrass you, providing you're not lying, you're not misleading people. No one wants to give radical transparency about everything in your life. Some things are private. And also you have to respect the privacy of other people. But when it comes to public goods, like the rainforest, or money that you're managing for somebody else, or technology that can affect the safety for other people when they drive a car at Tesla that you've invented, you have to test the car from a safety point of view, and you have to be transparent and reveal the flaws if requested by the regulators who are governing transportation safety. And the public needs to know if there's going to be a flaw in the Tesla in order to have the car repaired before there's an accident. So radical transparency is connected to radical truthfulness, and it enables radical truthfulness by giving access to information. So transparency is like looking through a window and you can see the truth through the window. But if you close the curtains, you can't see the truth anymore. Radical transparency is like opening up the curtain to look through the window and see scientific evidence, to see facts, verify the facts, and tell the facts to the relevant public or the counterparties that need to know the truth. So that's the second big lesson in principles. The third big lesson is that the best schools, the best companies, the best governments have meritocracy for ideas. What does that mean? It's one thing to have power, but a lot of the history of politics and the history of government going back thousands of years, say to the Roman Empire or the Greek Parliament in ancient times, where democracy was invented by the ancient Greeks. People who became a senator, who covered up the truth, didn't bring the best ideas because they were only trying to show how great they were. And when they had a chance to be reelected, they would only talk about what they did right and not what they did wrong. And they had no incentive to bring the best ideas forward. All they cared about was power in some cases. Other senators told the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and they won the trust of the people, or their ideas weren't good enough compared to other ideas that were competing in the marketplace of ideas in a democracy. So meritocracy, the word merit in meritocracy means like getting an A+. You've done a great job at research, you've written a great paper, you interviewed the right people, you did the fact checking, and you drew the right conclusions based on premises that were tested and verified. Well, that's an example of merit. That's why you would get an A+ or a high score on your paper. But in the marketplace of ideas, in a democracy, not all ideas are true. We know that, in fact, there were a lot of lies told by political leaders in the past. And one thing people want in a democracy is idea meritocracy, meaning the best ideas win. The best ideas in entrepreneurship is very important because entrepreneurs start new businesses and they can't lie to their investors. They can't lie to their customers because inevitably the truth will come out, and it's very important for credibility not to lie, to always tell the truth, even if the truth hurts. I'm not talking about privacy. Like if one of your employees is sick and has an illness, that's confidential. That's an exception to the principle of transparency. You don't want to violate people's privacy. But in general, if there's an idea that can help solve a big problem, that idea should compete to win, even inside a school. If there's a debate on what's the best thing to do in a student council when you run for president of the school, or if you run for office, high office like a member of Congress or a mayor, they have to tell the truth because they have a public responsibility to tell the truth and to provide transparency for all the best ideas. That's called idea meritocracy, where the best ideas win. So that's another example of principles. So you can learn a lot from reading Ray Dalio's book. One of the principles is embrace reality, embrace the facts, and deal with the facts. Don't hide the facts. Don't lie about the facts, because the facts are inherently true. Be radically open-minded, meaning if somebody's presenting you with an idea with merit that could possibly add to your idea and enhance it and make it feasible to implement, you want to be open-minded and incorporate new ideas into your idea. So when you do research on a new product or a new invention, you want to always improve it. And therefore you have to be open-minded and give credit where credit is due. If an engineer is working with you and they come up with the best idea and they want their name on the patent before it's filed, before a patent office, almost every country has a patent office where you can reserve ideas. The best ideas are ideas that are novel, brand new ideas. So I'm going to summarize that embracing reality and dealing with it is one of Ray Dalio's most important principles. He also talks about pain and reflection equals progress. And I'm going to try to summarize a few more of his principles and then wrap up with a short dialogue in a minute with Marcelo. So what does pain and reflection equal progress mean? So if you embrace truth, and some of that truth is painful, like the history of a country or the history of the rainforest, and that there are painful trade-offs between agricultural development and saving the rainforest. It's very painful, if you think about it, to tell the truth, and it may cost you your job as a political leader. On reflection, however, you know it's the best thing for the planet, even if it hurts some farmers in your country in Brazil. So how do you achieve progress? A, you confront reality, you deal with the pain that it may be a painful trade-off that some people win, some people lose in your economy, but upon reflection, that resolution of that painful trade-off equals progress. So rather than avoid pain, embrace why is there pain? Why is there a painful trade-off in economics? A trade-off meaning some people win, some people lose, some people gain, some people don't gain. Why is that progress? It depends on the value of the gain versus the pain. If the gain is greater than the pain, that equals progress. So there's 5 steps. I'll conclude with this 5 steps to get what you want out of life according to Ray Dalio's principles. Number 1, have very clear goals, followed by identifying not only what are the problems that are in the way of achieving your goals, but accurately diagnose the problems to get at the root causes, meaning the truth underneath the problems. Design plans that help you get over the problem or around the problem or solve the problem. And finally, do whatever is necessary to design a strategy to achieve the right results. And that's a continuous process of verification, fact-checking, research to apply this model of reality to achieve your goals even when the truth is not obvious. You have to do research and dig the facts out through research. That's why when you do research for any class, say in high school or junior high, it's so important to get the facts right through research, interviewing, secondary research through books and magazines, the internet, but not everything's on the internet is true. So you have to verify the facts and fact check them before you rely on that information. And understand that every human being has a different mentality. Everyone is wired differently, meaning we all have different perceptions, different emotions, different education, and that helps us come up with different conclusions. Some people emphasized compassion and caring, another like in a caring profession like nursing or medicine. But then others say, well, no, it's more important to be scientifically accurate. And if somebody has a terminal disease, you have to deal with that painful fact and try to cure it using the best immunology or the best technology. So now I'm coming to the conclusion of this talk because we're running out of time. So again, to conclude, identify, accept, and learn how to deal with your weaknesses and overcome them by accepting the truth about the weakness, and always have people around you who are honest rather than keep all of their negative thoughts to themselves. You want them to be constructively critical to give you more truth so that you can make adjustments. And being yourself rather than having to appear always to be strong and never weak could lead to failure. Always embrace the best ideas and try to search for truth. So those are the steps in his process for dealing with reality. So I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to one or two questions from Marcelo to wrap up. Thank you.
It's great, Robert. Thanks so much. And it's good to see Ray Dalio's principles adapted to teenagers with the right kind of examples. And the one thing that came to mind was that a word that should be taught at schools that most people don't even realize exists is double speak. And double speak, just as an example, is like you've baked cookies and you had some chocolate in the kitchen. You had to leave. When you come back, the cookies and the chocolates are gone. And you ask your friends who ate the cookies and chocolates, and your friends say, I didn't eat the chocolates. You're like, okay. So that friend is not lying because he ate all the cookies, but he's basically saying, oh, it wasn't me, but only answering half of the question. And even though he's not lying technically, he's lying in spirit because he took something from you. So I think that double speak should be taught. They should be understood by teenagers because sometimes people will just tell you half truths and they're comfortable that they're being honest because they're not lying outright. But in fact, they're causing harm because they're taking away knowledge that you deserve to know. So, Robert, if you like, very briefly to have a comment on double speak, especially in the world of politics. I mean, I'm Brazilian from the Amazon, so your example, of course, but
So,
let's talk about the United States just for a minute or so.
so in the United States political environment, we have two major parties, Democrats and Republicans. And the previous president, according to the Washington Post, told over 35,000 lies. And he defended himself and said, well, if I said it, if I'm the president, I have the authority, it's true. Of course, not everything he said was true. And what happens is when people speak to the public, to millions, tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, a lot of people are not equipped with the tools for verification. So they're gullible. Some people are gullible, meaning they'll believe anything they hear and they trust the leader on the internet or on the television or on the video. And so even if they say something that is half true, they'll believe it because people want to believe their leaders are truthful. So leaders can mislead the followers using propaganda. And propaganda is a type of rhetoric, a type of speaking that is either inherently misleading or partially misleading because it omits part of the truth. And that's called doublespeak, as Marcelo said. So there's a very important principle of how much do political leaders tell the truth, even if it's embarrassing, like negative news, like that we're going to have more people killed by coronavirus. That's very negative news. And yet the previous administration was not totally truthful about the trend toward coronavirus hurting families. So doublespeak was part of the political culture in the last 4 years, and we need truth from our leaders. Thank you.
Yeah. So you have to not only pay attention, but to look at issues from multiple angles, right? Try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is more conservative, more liberal, and try to understand why they think the way they think, and try to be more open and accepting of ideas, because your reality is just an interpretation of someone else's reality. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's super late for you there. It's
Yeah,
really
I wrote this book, the first biography of Bill Clinton. So I'm the first presidential biographer of that particular American president. So I learned a lot about politics writing that book. So I encourage you to write an essay about leadership and about these principles and how to apply these principles to leadership in your school, in your family, in life, and in business or in academia going forward.
yeah,
Never plagiarize, always tell the truth. Thank you.
advice. Thanks so much, Robert. And
My pleasure.
well, I'll catch up soon.